Welcome in, Big Blue Nation, to another episode of the Cats Talk podcast. The fellas are all back after a week off. It wasn't a planned week off, but thanks to Spectrum and their Wi-Fi outages across the country and across Fort Thomas, Kentucky, to be specific, we did not have the opportunity to do a podcast last week. But all the guys are here. We are ready to go. And Jacob, everything that's been talked about in Lexington over the past 2 weeks is the revenue split and what the University of Kentucky is going to do. Lay it out from what Matt Norlander told us versus what we've heard from other people. Just give the fans a brief overview, and then we'll discuss it in a little bit more detail.
Well, yeah, so I'm sure everybody's aware of the, revenue sharing that came into effect here at the start of this month. The number for all schools is $20.6 million. Kentucky, like most schools kind of across the board, is putting forth just about all of that besides, maybe a few percent towards football and basketball. That's kind of the decision every school is going to have to make is how do we split it. If you look around the country, it's kind of estimated about $2 million will go to your other sports, baseball, women's basketball, all that stuff. And then, yeah, to your point, some mixed reporting out there from, guys that are very well connected. So I think both football and basketball think they're getting quite a bit of money. It was reported that pretty much all the SEC schools agreed to a $15 million and a $3.5 million split. And the SEC was almost going to implement that as a rule, and Kentucky kind of stood up and was the loudest voice in that room and said, we're not doing that. We're not going to put ourselves at that disadvantage. And then now Matt Norlander is reporting that, he thinks Kentucky's going to split 9-9 opposed to all the other SEC schools. And then if you listen to like Matt Jones talk about, he's had people from the football staff say that that's not going to be the case, and the amount of money they're going to get is similar to what the rest of the SEC is seeing. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how it plays out. I know we're going to discuss quite a bit on what we would do if we were in Mitch Barnhart's shoes, but he's definitely got a tough decision to make.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a very tough decision. But I do agree with the stance on them not taking the SEC's deal and making that an annual tradition of 15 and 3.5. Because I like the ability to move it to certain years. 1 year, let's say, hey, just think about ways in which you do contracts. Hey, maybe I can front load the basketball team with all 2-year deals this year, and next year I can use a lot of that money towards a football program. So just from that perspective, I like the ability of, the flexibility it gives the university in which ways they can go and spend that money differently. But I will say if it is anywhere near close to the 9-9 split, I know I'll be in the minority here. And Jacob, I don't know if you'll agree with me, or Tyler, if you'll agree with me. If it's 9-9, you might as well just go ahead and cancel this football program, because there is not a world in which the University of Kentucky is going to be able to compete with Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Ole Miss at a $6 million deficit. There's just no way. I mean, we can barely compete as is now with the disadvantages we have. I'll let you guys go ahead and talk a little bit more on what you think about that, but that's one of my biggest takeaways, at least.
Yeah, we'll really kind of get into it, but my initial reaction is I don't know if 9-9 is the number, but we got to give a lot more than the SEC, because here's the thing: in basketball, we're not competing against the SEC schools like Alabama, Auburn. I fully expect to kind of take a step back in their basketball programs, but we got to look at it from the perspective of what is Duke going to be spending on basketball. It's going to be a lot more than any other SEC school. What's UConn, Kansas, North Carolina potentially. Every school in the Big East that doesn't have a football program, we're going up head to head against those. And the goal in basketball is obviously to win national championships. So you got to not only be able to compete in your conference, you got to be one of the 5 best teams in the whole sport. And I think, I'm not jealous of Mitch with this decision, because it's very much a rock and a hard place situation. But, if I was in his shoes, I would be giving a lot more to basketball. I don't know what the exact number would be. I would probably lean. I don't know. Honestly, I would have to kind of see what those other schools, how much are they able to generate and pay of that $20 million towards their basketball program. But, 9-9 might sound a little far fetched, but I mean, I would probably be about. I think the basketball team's going to need about $7 million to compete nationally.
Yeah, just an interesting time, I think, for college sports in general. This is since NIL really took place. Now we're getting the rev split here. I mean, yeah, I think this is the first time that college sport fans are really truly starting to see the business of what college sports is becoming. To your point, I mean, we're seeing like schools are making decisions based off what they're known for. In this case, Kentucky is really well known for their basketball program. And Cam, to your point, and you're talking about competing against schools like Duke. They're going to be allocating a lot of their resources toward basketball too. We are in the SEC, so if you want to have a competitive football program, you kind of have to make the decision: are we going to put a lot of money into that program? Or are we going to let it take a back seat? Are we going to, what are we doing here? It's really interesting. I do kind of agree with you, Cam. I think that this is really hurting the Kentucky program that already hurts in the SEC. So this is going to be tough if it is a split, more of a 50-50 split between the two. But I do think that Kentucky makes the right decision by prioritizing the basketball program as a whole, just because that is what they're known for. That is the Kentucky brand from an athletic standpoint.
Yeah, and like to those points, like I agree that as opposed to the rest of the SEC, we do need to make sure that our basketball program gets more than every other team in the SEC. But the thing that you also got to remember is these teams that you're talking about, like their football programs are either non-existent or they really just don't have one. Like UConn has a football program, but I mean, the only person I ever think of to put on like is Byron Jones, who played for the Cowboys about a decade ago. And those are the guys that you're talking about competing with. Those are campuses and universities that don't make money off their football program. The University of Kentucky made $46 million off of the football program last year. That is where we get most of, if not all of our money. The basketball program, we're one of the few teams in the nation that actually does turn a profit on their basketball team, but it's nowhere near to the level of what football brings in. Is that more to, football just being a bigger brand than basketball? Yeah, probably, because there probably are more Kentucky basketball fans. But that money, you're going to have to get that money from that football program. And if a 4-8 season continues and you give less and less money, I mean, I think you might get to a point where the SEC looks at you and says, hey, we want to be a football school. You're not putting your money into it. Let's look to part ways.
The SEC's never going to kick us out.
I don't think they will either.
They're not kicking us out.
I think there's more factors to
it. There's also been times during that where we have been competitive and we've actually been putting money into the football program. I'm talking about just strictly because I think you and I both know, all of us can agree, that if Kentucky is going up against Alabama at a $6 million budget deficit, there's just no chance they're competing. I don't care who you have. You can play the Oakland A's money ball. You're not competing in that. It's just not how it works.
No, it's not. But, I mean, on a real level, also, like, we're not competing as is. And I don't care if we took our entire $18.5 million that we're going to, put towards two sports and you put it all towards football. I mean, you would have obviously better seasons and we would have the years like we've had where you go 10-3, but you can invest every dollar and like, this team's not going to go win a Rose Bowl on its way to winning a national championship. And like, I think, if we're investing one of the top percentages in basketball, we're probably going to continue to hang banners like we've done in the past.
Yeah, Jacob, I mean, to a certain extent, I agree with you that based on recent track records, even if you gave that full $18.5 million to the football program, I could see where, you would think they might not put a better product on the field. But I kind of want to argue it from the other lens. Like, I feel like if you give Kentucky basketball $3.5 million, like that history has to show for something. It's a lot easier to get kids to take a little bit less money to play at the University of Kentucky. I know money talks in most scenarios, and especially in today's world. But let's put this into like baseball terms. If you're getting $5 million to play for the Colorado Rockies, who are going to lose 120 games a year, or you get $5 million to go play for the Dodgers, who you know are going to be World Series contenders, or $5 million from the Yankees, you're not going to play in Colorado.
Wow.
And for that reason, I don't think you can put this football program at a bigger deficit as is. Because whether we all agree on this or not, Jacob, I think you agree with me on this. A Stoops buyout is coming at some point. Whether it's after this year or in 2 years, it's coming at some point. So you're going to need that money. And when you need to hire a new coach in the future, you're not getting a good coach who's coming in here saying, oh, you want me to play in the SEC and get $6 million less per year than everybody else? There's no chance. You're
Yeah.
going to get Tyler Britton coaching on the team, and guess what? You'd be begging for that 4-8 season that we had, begging for it, because guess what? We're going to start going 0-12 and losing to Tennessee Tech and Toledo.
Well, I'm gonna make 2 points because I do want to touch on that Stoops buyout point. Number one, I think your tradition carries you so far, but the example you gave was 2 schools paying equal money. If we're at $3.5 million and Duke's spending $9-10 million and UConn spending $12 million and St. John's up there with their mob money spending another $12 million, like tradition, it's not going to carry you that far. Look at professional sports. It's kind of the only thing we have to compare it to, but again, if the Yankees are going to offer me $1 million, but the Rockies are going to offer me $4 million, that's a completely different scenario. And I think we're seeing that already, like in the NIL era. Like a lot of this tradition is working itself out, and kids are kind of going where the money is. So while I think that's why I actually think the fairness and more competitive teams is a lot better today in college sports than it was 5-10 years ago, because now everybody can kind of pay, and it's not just relying on your tradition. Kids are going to other schools than Alabama football, just like we're seeing the best player in the nation go to BYU this year in basketball. I don't think if we're paying $6 million less than Duke to build a roster, we're not going to be able to compete with those schools. And those schools are going to invest in basketball, and that's why this is such a tough discussion and decision. As far as the Stoops buyout, what if there's a world where Mitch is like, I'm not going to fire him, but I'm going to make it hell for him, and I'm going to make it to where he doesn't want to stay, and we are going to pay until we get a new coach in 5 years. Who knows what the landscape even looks like in another 3, 4, 5 years? But I'm going to give football a huge disadvantage. Let Stoops kind of get worked, and he might just get fed up with it. There's the reports he's potentially kind of ready to leave anyway. There is a world where you kind of just handicap him to the point where he says, I can't take this anymore, and quits, and then you avoid that $50 million buyout.
Yeah, but also playing like devil's advocate there, what coach that you're going to want to come in and take over that football program is going to look at what you just did for what most people look at as the best coach in your team's history, looks at how you treated him and is like, yeah, I want to go sign up to play and go to work with those guys.
I think if you had the money and you tell whatever ex-coach, hey, you're going to be having the same as any other SEC school, I think they would come and play. The other aspect of this, and to my point of let's see what it looks like in 2-3 years, right now they're saying you're going to get in trouble if your donors and boosters continue to, go above that $20.6 million. But let's see how the NCAA enforces it, right? The NCAA said pay to play was never going to be a thing in the NIL era. Tennessee, Florida State, all these schools just kind of came out and said, F you, we're going to do it, figure something out. The NCAA never did anything to those schools. So who knows? There's a world where we can give our quote unquote rev sharing money to football, and the boosters, kind of like they did this year, are going to build the most expensive basketball roster out there. So that's also a world. So I think that's kind of the big thing of let's wait and see how this plays out. But for the next 2 years, I think we got to kind of keep ourselves in a position to keep basketball top. We want to be the gold standard, and I think we're going to have to pay to be the gold standard.
I agree with Boyers here, actually. With this, with first of all, keep the standard. The Kentucky basketball is standard. This is new for everyone across the board. So for this to be happening, transpiring the way it is, schools are going to try to stick to their bread. You're probably looking at Ohio State. Ohio State's definitely going to focus on their football program. Kentucky is definitely going to focus on their basketball program. Once we get a couple of years into this, though, and people kind of see what's transpiring, what traditions are still working for selling these kids to come out to their schools, what's selling these transfers to come out to the schools, because we have to remember a lot of these kids who are going to be asking for top dollar, they're going to go to the schools and they're going to be like, why am I benched? Why am I benched in year 2 of this? And then they're going to try to find a money ball type team, maybe like Kentucky, who want to go play football there. It's going to be weird, but you're going to see. I think we're going to start seeing trends over the next couple of years. I think teams will adjust. And then talking about the Mark Stoops things, okay, cool. So maybe they're backdooring him just a little bit. Mark Stoops retires. They're looking for a new coach. I know I'm not saying this is going to happen, but like, what if Urban Meyer came knocking on the door saying, "Hey, I want to coach at Kentucky football"? You think that the athletic director is going to sit there and say, "Yeah, we're just going to offer you maybe 50% of what we're going to, dish out between you and basketball"? No, I think they're going to negotiate that a little bit. They're going to give some more resources to Kentucky football so they can go win with Urban Meyer. Again, I'm not saying Urban Meyer is coming, but if that kind of caliber coach comes in, I think they're going to allocate new resources that way.
Yeah, and I would like to say that that's the best point Tyler's ever made on this podcast. I just agree with my take more often. I don't know about Urban Meyer coming, but other than
I'm gonna Tyler. I'd rather have you coaching. At least I don't got to worry about you off the field.
That was only the NFL. He's a good college coach. Come on.
But, yeah, the funny thing is, I actually think it's going to be kind of more interesting to watch the SEC around basketball. It'll be interesting. Well, high-level coaches like Todd Golden and Nate Oates and Bruce Pearl stay at places where football is going to kind of be have everything front and center, or are they going to look to jump to a Big East or so on and so forth? Florida, hell, before even NIL, that was the big reason Billy Donovan was fed up with it and left. He won back-to-back national titles, and they wouldn't even sell out their games besides when Kentucky came into play. So it'll be kind of interesting to see, do those coaches kind of start to look to make the jump to the Big East or, an ACC school where they can go and get a lot more of the money.
Yeah, and I'm kind of just also, I don't know if you guys are looking at it necessarily from this perspective, just from a business perspective. If I even if you said you give that full $18 million to the football program, they turned a $46 million profit last year.
Yeah, it's tough.
Just from a business perspective, the SEC, that's where you make your money. Even, I think we were one of 2 SEC programs last year to turn a profit with their basketball team. And it wasn't a wide margin. Not like we made a ton of money on this basketball program. So, you might get to a point where you're actually losing money at University of Kentucky for their basketball program. And while, at the end of the day, all we want to do is hang banners and do this, the university still wants to make their money. That's what they're all out to do. That's their number one goal. And I don't see a world in which, granted, I know you're not advocating for this either, but there's no chance in which this can be 50-50. I understand even maybe giving them a little bit more to try and compete with what UConn's giving them, UNC, Duke, Kansas, those guys. I get trying to stay competitive with them. But like you mentioned also, is the rest of the SEC going to put in with that? I don't think the rest of the SEC is going to put up with Kansas and Duke. Well, guess what? That's where 28 of our games come during the regular season and during the SEC tournament. Guess what? At that point, you and I both know not always does the best team in the NCAA tournament win at all. You just have to get into the dance and find your way there. Now, granted, there's different circumstances that you're going to have a 2015 Kentucky team that just happens to lose to a Wisconsin team that they should have never lost to. But there's no world in which I think it can be anywhere near close to 50-50 or even 12-6. I don't even think that's possible. I get you want to stay competitive with Kansas and all them, but they don't make that much money on their football program. They don't get the SEC media rights deals that Kentucky does. You can't abandon this football program. I know right now it's easy because you're coming off of the Mark Pope high. You're coming off of the great season. We're finally back in the Sweet 16, and you're looking at Stoops, and you're like, man, 4-8, 6-6 the year before, 7-5 the year before that. Things are trending down that way, and they're trending up the other way. It's a lot easier to put money in stuff like that. But like Shy Pete said, some of those times those lost causes are the only things that are worth fighting for. And when the money's there to back it up, I think that's really what it is. I think you really have to put money into this Kentucky football program. I'm not saying put in more than Alabama or them, but I think you have to stay on par with them at least because Alabama football is going to have more donors than University of Kentucky is, like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I just disagree, and I think, to your point, yeah, the best team doesn't win it every year, but 99% of the times, one of the five best teams wins it every single year. And I think if you want to consistently be one of those best fives, I mean, look at a school take Marquette, for example, a school that doesn't have a football program that can maybe throw 10 to 12 million into basketball with a pretty good head coach in Shaka Smart. Like, they could rise to a power. Like, there's a lot of teams that are sitting there that have the path to really kind of take off on this thing. We're seeing it with St. John's. They're investing heavy. UConn's obviously going to continue to pay. And then your Dukes, Kansas, North Carolinas. But to your point, Cam, of they don't have, the football program, I think that even puts Kentucky at a bigger advantage. We're getting the SEC TV deals. We're getting all the SEC money, whether we're competitive in football or not. Now, I totally understand, if nobody comes to your games, this team's not going to turn a profit, or this university is not going to turn a profit. And I think that's what makes Mitch's job so hard. But I think he's almost going to have to balance, hey, I just need to stay relatively competitive in football and be a team that's going to win, between 5 and 7 games every single year, have enough excitement. And part of what's killing them is they've, if you've asked people that have been around the football program forever, they've kind of ruined the fan experience of it all. So maybe you got to find a way to get back to that, increase the tailgates, get these people that kind of left the program coming back that were there when we were 2-10. But if you can just stay competitive enough, and I know as fans, we don't want to go watch our, a mediocre football team forever. But I just think that's kind of what it's going to have to be. We'll have an occasional year where maybe we get lucky and go win 8-9 games. But I just think the path for this team and this university is going to be have a subpar football team that is good enough just to keep sales in, win a couple of times, go to a couple bowl games, get that money, and then hopefully, and if you're not a top 5 basketball team, none of this matters, and this whole point is minute. But I think that's what the drawing board should be. We're going to try to be a top 5 basketball team every single year. Football, we're going to try to continue to bring in a profit, put people in the seats, and just not be bad enough to where people aren't showing up.
Well, I've got 2 things real quick on that, and I'll throw it over to you, Tyler. Just in general, I think we can all agree, $9 million in the SEC for a football program is not getting you 5 wins at all. Nowhere close. So, I mean, to that point, you're looking for those 3 non-conference wins of the small teams that you should beat, and then you're just looking at going 0-8 against the SEC for the
well, and you got to find a way to probably beat Louisville, and if it stays an 8-team schedule, then you're trying to win 1 or 2 SEC games every year. I think that's kind of the path.
I think we can all agree. It's just not going to happen when you're at because even teams that are bad right now in SEC football, like Mississippi State, they're not going to put any money in that basketball program, so they're going to have $15 million going to that football program. That $6 million is going to take them from being 16th in the SEC, which they're at right now. We're at 15th. That's going to give them enough edge to beat us consistently. I don't think you're putting a product of generally a team that can go 4-8 with being $6 million under what everybody else is in the SEC. And then just back to your Marquette thing there a little while ago, where do you think Marquette's going to be getting $12 million to put in their basketball program?
Well, they're going to be relying on boosters. It's the same thing as St. John's. They're going to be relying on boosters.
Marquette and St. John's, I think, are 2 completely different animals when you're talking about that. One plays in Madison Square Garden, and the other one has Shaka Smart as their head coach. My thing is more when I'm saying that is the reason that Kentucky is going to be guaranteed to have this much money is because of the football program.
I disagree, and I think if you listen to people
in the Big 10 and the Big 12 the Big 10 will, but once you get to the Pac-12, the ACC, the Mountain West, places like that, I don't see them getting $12 million to run to their basketball program. Now, St. John's, I can see that. Duke, I can see that. Kansas, I can see that. Those blue bloods, yes. But when you start going into the ones like Marquette and places like that, I don't see them being able to, like Tyler mentioned, 3 and 4 years down the line, consistently drumming up $12 million in donations for their basketball program. I just don't see it being possible.
I'm not. I mean, I'm not smart enough to look at a school's budget and tell you where they're going to come up with the money. But when you look at people that really focus on this, the Matt Norlanders of the world, not every Big East school, but a lot of the Big East schools are the ones that he's talking about are going to be at a huge advantage, especially if the SEC is not paying. Now, they can pay obviously up to $20 million, $20.6 million. They're obviously not going to pay that. But he thinks a lot of these Big East schools are going to get to 10, 12, 15 million. He mentioned Xavier as a potential, sleeping giant that can really take off in this new era. So again, I'm not somebody that's looking at a school's budget and smart enough to understand it. I'm not a very good accountant, but when people that I know kind of understand this a little better or saying they can do it, I think you got to kind of look at competing with those schools.
Yeah, but I think that's also being taken out a little bit of context of what I just said. That when Matt Norlander's talking about a lot of that, he's talking about the next year and the year following. He's not talking about consistently year after year after year having those money in donations. At least from what I've heard him talk. Unless you saw something else.
I don't think it's not simply just donations. Like maybe the school can invest, another 5 a year into it, and then they're coming up with 3 to 5 more on top of it via donations or something. But like it could also be like, I mean, you don't make a profit in basketball a lot of times, but as these schools are getting bigger brands and stuff, there's stuff that comes along with that. And, I think you're seeing it. It'll be interesting to see, like, if North Carolina makes this jump to the SEC, like, what are they going to do? Because they obviously want basketball to be good as well. I mean, even now in the ACC, they got Bill Belichick. Like, it'd be interesting to see. Are they going to put Bill Belichick at a huge disadvantage compared to, teams that are going to be in the playoffs versus Clemson? Or are they going to give that money to Hubert Davis?
Or I actually think that's a really good point. Kind of goes back to my point earlier. You get North Carolina, for example, who did just bring in a Bill Belichick. Like, you're not going to waste that time, especially at his older age, and not put money into the program. I think that same thing would come along after the Mark Stoops era. But I am curious, Cam, because I know you're financially sound here. If you were, you're the athletic director for Kentucky Kentucky sports athletics, how would you negotiate this budget across football, basketball, and other sports?
Well, so the thing is like, unlike you, Tyler, I like to be in front of trends. Like you said, like, let's wait 3 years and then we'll act. You can't do that. You want to be out in front of these because then you're just putting yourself at a disadvantage in all of the sports. So unlike, kind of what you had mentioned earlier was like, hey, let's just sit back and let's see what everybody else does. I don't think you can take that mindset because there's just 3 years that go by the wayside. I also think you're getting to a point where college coaches are starting to make a lot less money than they had previously.
Yeah.
Like, look at Coach Pope's deal as opposed to what we had with Coach Cal. So when Stoops' time is gone, you're going to be able to get somebody cheaper than Stoops. But I'm telling you right now, you're going to have to pay a pretty penny to get somebody to come into the SEC if he knows that budget is going to be 9-9. Now, the reason I started off our whole episode with saying this, and the reason I like the fact that they didn't agree to the 15 and 3.5, which I think you guys are kind of forgetting that I said to start with, is because I love the ability to be flexible 1 year. Like, let's say, hey, listen, I just went out with Coach Pope. We just killed it in the recruiting rankings. I've got guys that I can sign to 2-year deals, and I can get them. I can guarantee they're locked up for this year. Hey, sorry, Mark Stoops, instead of getting your 15 that you're supposed to this year, you're going to have to take 12 because I can get this locked up for 2 years with a basketball program. And then the same thing with Pope. If it's something to where you're like, I've got this generational talent quarterback that for whatever reason we can get him at the University of Kentucky, I need more money this year. I love having that flexibility. So for that reason, I love that they didn't sign that. So I like being able to change it year to year. But if we're just looking at – it's also like Jake's mentioned, not knowing what like St. John's and Duke and Kansas are going to do is what we're going to have to look at. Because obviously we're going to have to care more about our football program than those schools do, just being in the conference that we are. So I do think we're going to have to go at a disadvantage to what they do. Whether you like that or not, I think we have to, just because to field a team that's anywhere near competitive in the SEC, like Jake said, even to get to a 5-7 record every year, you can't be at a $6 million deficit. So I mean, if you're talking about 18 million is going to the two sports collectively, I think it's the max that you can do to give the basketball program more money is 13 million for the football team and 5 million for the basketball team. That still puts them at $1.5 million over everybody in the SEC. You are the blue blood. That should have you run through the SEC pretty easily. Obviously, we all love Coach Pope and think he's doing great things. I mean, we saw what he just did with that roster last year that didn't have all that much talent. Run through the SEC. Is it going to be tough to knock off, a BYU who's paying AJ Devonsa $6.7 million? Sure, it's going to be tough, but also that's why you pay Coach Pope that money as well. So, I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on that. I did feel like I was getting pigeonholed in there by both of you, especially Tyler, who did not listen to 95% of what I said.
No, I mean, there's a lot of interesting points, and also it's going to make it comparable to how we judge these coaches going forward, right? If Mark Pope's not making Final Fours, but we're outside the top 15 in basketball paid money every year, you can kind of understand it, right? If Mark Stoops is going 5-7 or 6-6, but he's at a $4 million disadvantage to the rest of the SEC, you'd probably say he's doing a hell of a job, not just an okay job. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see how we evaluate these coaches going forward. Tyler, I'll tell you what my breakdown would be. I'm at more than in Cam, but I do agree you can't just completely, front load it and go 9-9 or something crazy. I think I'm between 5.5 and 6 million to the basketball team, and I know that's going to put you at a huge disadvantage in football, but I'm hoping that number would be competitive enough to get you, a solid basketball roster every single year and a roster that Pope can do something with. I think if you just look at this year, I mean, it's rumored Kentucky spent between 15 and 17 million on basketball this year. Now, in part, a lot of that is if you listen to Matt Norlander, he thinks Mark Pope was extremely smart, and he didn't say that for sure he did this, but he believes probably that 9 million that we're seeing this year is because they took the 4.5 for this year and added it in. Well, for next year, they'll pay 9 total, but 4.5 of that's going to be this year's money. Because we signed everybody before July 1st when these rules went into place. We loaded those guys up with quote-unquote NIL donations versus, the rev share. So if you have this year's plus next year's, the next year, basketball can spend $9 million again, and then from there you figure it out down the
line. Let me ask another question to the group here, because I'm curious, just listen to both of you talk and the debates that we're having here in this conversation alone. Do we see athletic directors being looked at like NFL GMs now in a way where they're going to have to make financial decisions like, hey, how much money do I swing this way versus that way? And based off how a program grows or regresses, maybe one program's doing okay and they're doing for example, Kentucky decides to allocate a little more resources in the basketball, which is fun. That's exactly what Kentucky is known for. So obviously they're going to have an elite program, but if that significantly hinders what the football program does the athletic director now get terminated out of the university?
I don't think we look at them like an NFL GM because obviously there's multiple sports and you're investing in different ways, right? Jerry Jones only has to worry about the Dallas Cowboys and football. He doesn't have to worry about how much do I spend on the Cowboys and then also go pay Mavericks players. So I think we're going to look at them in a whole different light. To your point, though, Tyler, I think we're going to look at athletic directors based on kind of the school they're at, right? If Alabama is winning national titles in football, but their basketball team is not very good and making NITs and every once in a while making the tournament, nobody in Alabama is going to be calling for that athletic director's job. I think it would be similar here if, to Cam's point, if we're winning 2 football games every year, somebody might look at the AD to, move. But if we're a below average football team winning 4 or 5 games, but, we're going on a generational run in basketball and going to multiple Final Fours and getting a title in there, fans are going to look at that a lot different. And I just think, especially in this era, the fan perception is going to have to change. There's not going to be many schools that are going to be very good at football and basketball anymore, right? The days of Florida winning national titles in football and then basketball, they're just gone. I think it was never going to happen here in Kentucky because we don't produce the players for football. But at any school, I don't foresee it happening.
Yeah, I think even more. I think you almost have to look at it as almost like a mayor of a city with like two professional sports teams who both need upgrades to their stadium rather than like looking at it as like an NFL GM. I mean, it's literally just you have to pick one or the other, and that's why I'm trying to come and talk to you guys just from like a business side. Like I get Kentucky basketball is the blue blood. It is 8 national championships, the amount of guys in the NBA. That's what we're known for. I get it, but at the end of the day, the money comes in from the football program. So if you just pick up all the sticks out of the tent and just move on and leave town, you're not going to be making as much money as you had. Like this was one of the worst years I think they had just revenue wise, based off the 4-8 season, the concessions, how bad this season went. If you come back this year with what we're all expecting, I think Tyler had the most optimistic take. And what'd you say, like 6-6 or 5-7 for this year? If you follow this year up, do that, and then another year after that by not giving this football program money, they're going to start digging into the University of Kentucky's pockets. And I think that's something that could get – now, granted, I don't think Barnhart's going to be fired just because he is the longest tenured AD. He might be in the country now. I know he is still in the SEC. But, I mean, there's just no way in which you're going to be able to do that. The University of Kentucky is not interested in losing money like that. And for that reason, I think – I even Jake mentioned like the 5.5 to the basketball program. I can see that. At least, you're putting out a team who you think can win 4 games and then maybe steals 1 or 2 games and you're somewhat competitive. But just as a Kentucky football fan, I mean, that kills me to say like, hey man, let's win 4 games and hope we can steal some every year. And that's going to be our pinnacle.
Yeah. Well, and I think a couple things real quick before we move off this topic. I do think Barnhart, you mentioned wanting to be a couple steps ahead and think about the future as well, Cam. I think Barnhart's kind of doing a good job of getting out in front of this with like privatizing the athletics department.
Yep.
Like that was a huge step like that not a lot of teams or schools have done. And we'll see how well it works out. Who knows? Maybe we look back in 10 years and it's the worst thing that's ever happened here. But I think they're getting out in front of that of like, hey, the budget, we may lose a little bit on football. We got to figure out ways to like generate money outside of this. And, I think that was something that's, I think it's going to be a huge success. We'll see kind of how it turns out, but, just kind of that bigger picture thinking and, we'll go from there.
Yeah. I mean, there is no right answer to any of this, which is the crazy part. Like there is,
I'm saying
Kentucky's in the weirdest spot. For me, I think in the nation, because you have a blue blood basketball program that you want to be a top 5 team every single year, but you are also in the best football conference, and that's where you get all of your money. So I mean, you really can't play in both fields, but you have to try and find a way to do because you get your money from your football program, and your fan base loves and has that loyalty to the basketball program. So like I said, I don't envy Mitch Barnhart's job and what he's doing right now. Granted, if somebody wants to pay me to be the athletic director at the University of Kentucky, I'll piss some people off and make some decisions. You might not like them, and it might not be. We might go bankrupt in a couple of years, but guess what? I'll do it.
Yeah, I know. Obviously, not every. There are the, UK football first fans out there, but they're definitely, in the minority. Like this state. It's nice when football's good. We all love it. Like basketball's got to be good. It simply does. You have to be one of the better programs in basketball going forward.
So what do you think would have happened? Let's say this happened like after 2019. Kentucky's scuffling basketball wise.
Well, I think 19 is tough because
2021 would more prove my point. 2021, after you have that good season, one of Will Levis, Wandale Robinson. You just had that great year football program. Now you're coming off of back-to-back bad years with the basketball program. People wanted Calipari gone. The Stoops, approval rating was through the roof. What are we looking
Yep.
at then? Because then you were looking at a football program where you looked and you're like, man, this is taking off. And our basketball program is, it's flipped in 4 years there. Completely flipped on its head. Now you have the new guy versus the guy who's been here too long but did have success. And that's why I don't want to just alienate one program. Because as soon as you do, there could be for all we know, Hope could not be the guy. Like, we loved everything that we saw out of him last year. But what if it doesn't work? And I think he's the guy too, and I fully agree to that. But what if he isn't? And then now you're giving $9 million to a basketball team who's just not getting it done.
Yeah.
I think there has to be give and take a little bit, and that's why I like the flexibility of potentially being able to rock a bunch of 2-year deals together, and just kind of say, hey, listen, this year football program it's $15 million for you. Next year you're only getting 12.
Yep. Well, and obviously, right, we're not carving any of this into stone and saying whatever Mitch Barnhart decides, here in the next few weeks or whatever is going to be what it's going to be, for eternity. Obviously, to your point, the flexibility, but also if you have a coach that's simply not getting it done, that's another tool. To your point about the Cal thing, I'm so glad this isn't happening with Cal because, I don't know what we would do. I don't know how you could do.
There would be a war in Lexington if this was happening.
Oh, my God.
Would be
No
100%.
You thought the basketball, football school comment was bad? Imagine if you're actually competing, for money. Cal's another one at Arkansas. It will be interesting to kind of see what he does. Does he sit there and just try to compete and be one of the better teams in the SEC? Or does he maybe either A, look to retire, or B, look maybe even at another jump? But
Arkansas loves their baseball program too, so
that's the other. I think from all the reports, the consensus is they're going to give about $2 million to other sports. But there's going to be these same kind of fights on a smaller level of do we give it to women's basketball or do we give it to baseball? I think Kentucky's going to be in that spot. What do you do there? Kenny Brooks is killing it. Minjione just took you to the College World Series for back-to-back years. 2 years ago, you went further than you've ever been in the entire tournament. He's kind of killing it on the recruiting trail. Kenny Brooks is trying to wake up the women's basketball program. It's not. None of this is an easy thing. But to your point, I'm really glad we're not doing it with Cal here. But also, if it hit back in 2011, 2012, I think it would be kind of awesome to have it with Cal here because he would demand every dollar, and we'd probably, we would have the number one overall team every single year, and I know we did, and we only won one title, whatever. But
yeah, let's say I don't know if much would have changed. We had all of that and still only had one.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm glad we're not making these decisions with Cal still here. I'll say that.
Yeah, do you think they're going to make this information public? Do you think we'll ever know? Do you think Barnhart will say? Because I know with going to the private entity, they could release that information. They could not. Obviously, for us, just to keep our ease of mind and, obviously, you don't get mad at the Cincinnati Reds for not competing with the Dodgers, knowing the two payroll differences. Obviously, as Reds fans, I want them to go out there and win those games. But at the same time, I'm like, hey, listen, Shohei makes more per year than this entire team. Yep. So I feel like that gives you a little bit of wiggle room as a coach and as, just the coaching staff in general. Be like, hey, listen, I am fighting with a $3 million deficit. So what I did was pretty good.
Is it tomorrow or next week that Mitch is going to speak to the press?
I'm pretty sure it's tomorrow. Tomorrow, because a lot of the other coaches talk as well tomorrow.
I would imagine he's going to be asked. I guess technically they don't have to, but there is kind of I don't know. There could be some legal things where even being private, you still might have to release the info. Mm-hmm. Regardless, they should. You 100% should. One, so the fans kind of know where we're at. To the point that we made earlier. If Mark Pope's given, $5 million more than the rest of the SEC and we're coming in fourth in the SEC in basketball, we should know and we should be able to say that. Same thing on the football side. If Stoops or whoever the next coach is finished in 5-7 or 6-6, but they're at a $4 million deficit than everybody else, those decisions need to be made. We can't roll into it and not know hey, is Stoops making the same as the rest of the SEC, and we're still only winning 4 games a year? Or, is Mark Pope at a huge disadvantage? Vice versa. You got to make it public knowledge.
Tyler, got any final thoughts on that before we switch subjects?
Yeah, I think that ultimately, one way or another, it'll become public, whether it's through the university or if it's through donors who are, one way or the other, whether they're really excited or just not happy where the donations are going. So, um, we'll see how this all plays out. This is a really interesting time in sports, far different from even just last year or the year before. So, everything's changing. We're going to see how this transpires. To your point, Cam, like, sometimes you got to take chances and be ahead of the game. As a former team president said to me, sometimes you don't want to be the first one to make the move, but you want to be a very close second. So, Kentucky is a very interesting spot. You got to your point, Cam, with Kentucky football in the SEC, and then you got an elite basketball program. I'm very intrigued. This is a very intriguing time for me as a sports administration major and just my career and everything. But I'm very interested to see how this transpires over the next several years.
I will say I would love to have like a ESPN film team behind the scenes at like the
Love
University
it.
of Kentucky Athletics for like the next 2-3 years, just to see like what these battles are. Because like I feel like you have to. I don't think Mark Stoops would be as upbeat and as grateful as he says he has been the past couple weeks and months if he knew he was coming in off of a 4-8 season and only getting $9 million.
Yep.
So I'm not sure if that number is accurate. I don't think that is, just based off of how they've acted and the money that it looks like they spent with the offensive line in particular, which is kind of where I want to transition here to is, guys, only 29 days away to the college football season.
And 15 hours until 12:45 on that Saturday, and the Cats kick it off.
And I am looking forward to it. And based on the tickets, it looks like we might be the only people looking forward to it, because you can get $25 tickets on Ticketmaster as of right now. But, guys, the offense coordinator, defense coordinator, and Coach Stoops all met with the media on Monday. I mean, biggest takeaways that I had, Stoops said there's been only one guy that's been tardy or late for a practice. It was a freshman. He's already been talked to by the other teammates, and they didn't have to step in and be accountable for that. And the one that got most people talking is, obviously, Jake already knows where I'm going with this. Bush Hamden saying this offensive line is going to be one of the best that the University of Kentucky has had. And I will say, as a guy who his bold prediction was this was going to be a top 5 unit in the SEC, I love to hear it, Bush. Get me excited. Turn me up a little bit, baby. Let's go.
I mean, it's great until you walk out there and you get another quarterback retire and play his last 2 games. Certainly, quite the take. I've very much been, show me with this year. I will say I'm not getting excited, but I think I've moved from 3 to probably 4. I'm still probably only 4. I don't really see a big path beyond that. Who knows? By the time we kick off against Toledo, I'll have us in the playoffs. Yeah. But, Bush, I know a lot of people kind of loved the comment and it got them fired up. I wasn't one of those. I thought, with just how bad that unit was a year ago, I mean, it was legitimately probably one of the worst since our 2-10 teams. If even before that, and you're also coming off of what Stoops kind of built his bread and butter on at this program without you being here was the O-line and, having guys like Landon Young, Drake Jackson, NFL caliber players. And to now say, one of the best ever, I appreciate the confidence, but, that's definitely going to be something that's going to be, talked about if they go out there and give up 4 or 5 sacks, against South Carolina again.
See, my thing is I genuinely think they have 3 NFL guys on this offensive line. I thought that coming in. That's why I've been so high on them. At this point, in my opinion, it's all whether Eric Wolford can put it together with the
That's a big.
That's also a question as well. I mean, that's why he was out of Alabama. He had a lot of talent there and couldn't get it done with those guys either. So, I mean, that is a big question mark. But, I mean, Josh Braun's already an all SEC guy. Shias Pete's getting recommendations from everyone at New Mexico, and they're talking about him being an NFL player. Alex Wolfschlager from Bowling Green, same thing there. And, the offensive line was bad last year, but you're returning the best one of them all in Jalen Farmer at right guard. And then now you're talking about, Jagger Burton, who was, maybe your second or third offensive lineman on that, is now fighting for a spot at guard. I mean, that's what you're looking at. So, I really think the floor of this unit has really been raised, and that's why I've told you guys I think this team will actually be a lot better. I just don't necessarily know if it'll come out in wins.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if the schedule aligns well enough for us. That's the tough part is the schedule. But from what I've been hearing and from what I've been looking into, it's nice to hear that the players are keeping each other accountable. Hopefully, we don't see another player go up there and get a hot dog mid game, that kind of thing. That's the kind of sloppiness that last year where I felt like we had really good talent on the team just wasn't coming together. It just seemed like that it was sloppy. I would say starting with the coach, but also that goes down to your team leaders. I think with from what we're hearing and a new culture being built within. I mean, you're talking about a lot of new faces coming into the program too. I mean, that you're really resetting the program. So I know we're in off season, Boyers. You're being a little bit of a grump right now, but you'll soften up as we get closer to.
I'll get him to come.
He'll come around as we get closer to the opening day here. He'll come around, but. They're definitely saying the right things and doing the right things behind the scenes to at least get the fans excited for August 30th here when we take the field.
All right, guys, and I'm gonna put you on the spot here. So, Jacob, I'm gonna start with you. I just give me one guy on this football team that you're riding with this year. Who's your guy? Who do you think is gonna surprise people? Whether it's Calzada performs above expectations. If you like Hardly Gilmore to, after all the offseason issues, you like him coming back. I mean, give me a guy and give me a little reason why you think he's going to outperform what we're expecting for him this year.
Well, I'm going to give you two. And the one, if you paid attention a few weeks ago when we gave our bold predictions game, if you would ever listen to me when I talk, you would understand that I'm not going to say Calzada since I predicted he would be benched.
I know you're not. But I was going to examples for Tyler to use later.
How about I give you the other quarterback in the room, and that'll be Cutter Boley when he does get his time to shine. I think, we saw, obviously the Louisville game wasn't great, but we know how bad that O-line last year was. I could see a world where Cutter Boley is a very solid SEC quarterback, and I think he'll get his opportunity at some point this season. So I'll take Cutter Boley. And then another, I don't know how much of a surprise it is. He's coming in either second or third running back. Wilcox, I think this year he's going to learn to keep his shoes taped on and tied up. And, a lot of explosive plays last year. Again, a better O-line to kind of run behind. If he can just make sure those shoes aren't flying off every 10 yards, I think he could have a pretty big season there.
All right, I got one on the defense side of the ball that I want to shout out specifically. Because, Jake, can you remember the last time it feels like the University of Kentucky didn't have a corner drafted in the first 3 rounds of the draft? There's always one. There's always a guy who shines. Andrew Phillips, Max Hairston, Lonnie Johnson, Mike Edwards. There's always somebody that shines during this time. I think it's J.Q. Hardaway's time. Played really well last year. Just another year to develop under the system with Brad White. And I think they're going to lean on the secondary a lot. You got the front sevens, basically a bunch of new guys. I think they're going to lean on the secondary a lot. I think J.Q. Hardaway is going to be really good this year. And I think he's going to have a chance to get himself drafted in the first 2 days of the draft. And then offensive side of the ball, I love Harley Gilmore. I can't quit it. I know the guy might be a mental head case. He got arrested and then kicked off a team at Nebraska after we kind of told him to leave and then we allowed him to come back. So I don't know what's going on off the field.
He's learned. It was a wake-up call.
It seems like he's learned. The guy was 17 years old last year. Now he's 18, a full year in college, getting that under his belt. And you saw what he was when he was on the field. He was able, as a 17-year-old freshman, to produce. I think he can be really good for this team. Now, granted, there's a logjam of receivers and older receivers with this team. J.J. Hester, Troy Stellato, Kendrick Law, Jamari Macklin. There's a lot of guys that he's got to bypass, Fred Ferrier as well. But I think he's got the biggest upside of that entire receiving core. I think if he keeps it keeps it between the ears, and he can keep everything going right there, I think he's going to have a great season. Tyler, wrap us up here with some guys that you think are going to do well for the season. We've bypassed you about 5 minutes here, so you could look up the roster real quick and pick one out.
I'm only going to go with the one guy here. Look, I think it kind of goes hand in hand with the complementary unit around him. It's going to be Zach Calzada. I was giving it some thought. I think he's going to hold the job all year. I don't think it's going to go to Cutter this year. I think just based on what we were talking about with the improvements of the O line, Cam. To your point, I think this O line is going to be significantly improved. To be honest, I just don't think it get worse. So any kind of improvement, some new energy coming in, new culture coming in, I think that's going to help improve it. This guy's all he has to do is just be steady. Nothing against Brock. I think Brock was put in a very bad spot last year, so I'm not going to try to pin this on Brock at all. I think Zach's in a little bit of a better position here where he can come in as long as he's not turning the ball over, as long as he's getting the ball out quickly and not making dumb decisions. I think he's just an upgrade to the position. I think we can keep a run game. We can play good Kentucky defense. I think that'll be a huge improvement. So my pick's going to be Zach and just see what he can do on the field. And I think he stays the starter all year just because of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, Jake. I was actually going to be one of my bold predictions was that I couldn't disagree. Not that I can't disagree with your take anymore. I don't see Cutter playing in more than 2 games this year, and that's just because of the only reason I'll leave it at that number is strictly because of injuries, and you know how Kentucky quarterbacks are. It seems like we haven't gone through a full season of a guy playing every game. I don't see Calzada losing this. I really don't. I love what Cutter showed in spots against Texas. I thought he was terrific. But I've also never seen a worse quarterback in my life in that Louisville game. Now, granted, the entire team was awful. So, I mean, I'm trying to burn that from my memory, but it's still right up there, and it still plays in the frontal lobe a lot, unfortunately. But I really agree with Tyler's take because think about it. This offensive line is going to be a lot improved, even if you just say they're middle of the pack. You've got Dante Dowdell from Nebraska, Seth McGowan, Jamarian Wilcox, Jason Patterson, a lot of guys that are still returning that you had last year that played big parts are still back. But you have that top end that you're allowing as well. Kendrick Law, you got a bunch of old guys out at receiver that can hold it down as well. I genuinely think this offense is going to be pretty good and is going to be able to play that old style of Mark Stoops football, just not mess up, not turn the ball over, run it down your throat, throw passes when they're able to. And with Zach being able to get out on the run, he had about 400 rushing yards last year, 35 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. I think it's Calzada's job for the rest of the year. And, I don't think it's crazy to say he finds a way to get drafted, kind of like Devin Leary did, even though he didn't have the best year at Kentucky. I think Calzada is a pretty good.
He is 35, so that does hinder that.
I know we got drafted at 28 in the first round, so.
Again, my point when I made the prediction that Calzada gets benched, it wasn't necessarily just because I thought he would be bad. It was more of a, indictment on the team as a whole. I mean, if you look at that schedule, there's a very real chance, you start 2-4 and you could come off back-to-back blowout losses to Georgia and Texas, and you got Tennessee rolling in here. At that point, what do you do to try to create some excitement? You make a QB change. That happens. Now, I know we're long, so I'm going to make one point really quick, all right? I've heard a lot of fans talk about this team's going to be better, but the schedule doesn't line up. I would argue from an SEC perspective, this is about as good of a schedule as you could have, outside of maybe playing Arkansas. I mean, just
and Mississippi State. Mississippi State's god-awful as well.
Right. All right. So, but you're not going to play them both, right? So, let's just be real about it for a second. Ole Miss is significantly down to where they were last year. You get them at home. You get a down Tennessee team at home. Florida, DJ Lagway there's a lot of speculation around injuries in there. Obviously, you're not going to beat Texas. You're not going to beat Georgia. I think those are ones you chalk up. I mean, you go to Auburn, who's not great. You go to Vandy. You have to go to South Carolina. If this team is good, there's wins there to be had. There's a path to 6-7 wins with a good team. So when I'm saying they're going to be bad and only win 4 games, it's because I think the team's going to be bad. I'm not going to hear a lot of, this is a really good team, but we just play a really tough schedule.
Yeah, I mean, To a certain extent, I agree with you. I also I'm starting to. I don't think Tennessee's going to be very good. I think that's becoming a lot.
Right.
I think I think that's becoming a lot more of a winnable game. If DJ Lagway is injured, that all of a sudden that becomes a lot more of a winnable game. So you start looking at the schedule, and when you just look at it, and you're like, oh man, all these huge.
So you're getting the 6, you're getting the 7.
I mean, it also depends on a lot is going to depend on how that first Ole Miss game goes because Ole Miss, you can say they're taking a step down and all of that, which they're losing a lot of talent. Obviously, they lost Walter Nolan, Jackson Dart, and Trey Harris as well. I mean, they're losing a lot, but Ole Miss also brings in a lot year after year, and they have a great coach as well. So I think Ole Miss will still be good, and I mean, it's going to be a big test. I think you'll learn a lot that game. Obviously, I don't want to put too much into that week because we put a lot into the Ole Miss game last year, and we won that game. So, but I think there are wins to be had. I might start. Let's put it this way. Right now, I think the over/under on the win total is 4.5.
I was just about to ask you. I was literally about to say July 31st. Cam, give me which way you bet.
Listen, I told you this back.
You log into FanDuel, you log into DraftKings. What we betting?
I told you this back in like the start of June that earlier in the preseason I'm going to be like, that's right around where I won't bet it. And as soon as we get closer to the season, I'm going to talk myself into it. And here we are, 29 days away. I've talked myself into it. Now, granted, am I going to the bank? Am I taking out the 401k to put it on the over? No. But I might be willing to put a pretty penny on this over because I think this team is going to find ways to win like the old Mark Stoops teams did. They're not going to be pretty. Trust me, guys. These wins are not going to be pretty, and you're not going to like the way they look. But guess what?
I think he wins.
If it has a win, if it has a W in the column, that's all I care about.
Absolutely. A win's a win.
Yeah, I think just looking at the schedule, coming down to that, boys, it's you're looking if we can get the wins that we're supposed to get. We're looking at Toledo, we're looking at Eastern Michigan, we're looking at a couple others. If we can get those wins, I mean that gets us our 4 right there, our 3 to 4 right there, and then we steal 1 or 2 from the SEC. That's where we're gonna be like, okay, cool, this team actually achieved what we thought they could achieve this year, based off the totality of the circumstances of the team. Do I see them going to the playoffs? No. Do I see them having the capabilities of making a bowl game? Yes, absolutely. It's going to be a grind for them. They're going to have to work hard for it, but I absolutely see that. And assuming that the improvements are being made and the culture change is going to help the team be less distracted of the things that are, less important, I think there is an opportunity. I do believe that there's an opportunity to win over 4.5 games. If we're going to use that as a standard, I think there's an opportunity to go 5 wins, 6 wins. I think my bold prediction was 8 wins. I think I went a little aggressive with that, but I mean, that is a possibility if we can overachieve.
I mean, if this team, again, I don't think they're good, but I mean, if they're good, there's 7 wins out there. And like, that's why I think when you look at the line of 4.5, I think it more so speaks to this team versus kind of the narrative that we hear a lot of, oh, that schedule's brutal. They play in the FCC, this and that. Like, again, I think South Carolina is going to be really good, so like that's a tough one. But there's a lot of quote unquote winnable games out there now.
Yeah,
they're also probably going to be an underdog in 8 games this year, so we'll see.
And really, the way I look at it, and we'll kind of leave it off of this here. The way I look at the schedule more than anything is just like which ones can you tell me are guaranteed losses? Is the way I kind of want to look at this team because we need to see them play first. There's so many new guys. They brought in 50 new guys. So I want to look at the schedule in a way of which one you think are guaranteed losses.
I think there's 2.
I mean, I might even give you 3 just with South Carolina, but South Carolina also has a ton of turnover. They lost a lot of guys to the NFL draft. Now, granted, they're bringing back Lenore Sellers for another year, but they lost a lot too. So, I mean, you're looking at 2 to 3 guaranteed losses. Outside of that, I mean, you're looking at teams like Auburn, Florida, and Vandy, which, in my opinion, all of those teams could either be, especially Auburn and Florida, could really do a lot better than you expect, or they could be a lot worse. I think there's big volatility with both of those teams. I don't think Vandy will be as good as they were last year. I don't see that happening again.
I agree.
So I look at it more as just like there's 3 guaranteed losses. How about you just find a way to go 7-2, 6-3 in those other ones, and you're looking at a pretty solid season.
Yep. No, I agree, and that was the whole point I was trying to make. And I'm so out on Hugh Freeze at Auburn. I know I'm not the only one. It's a pretty popular take, but yeah, I mean, there's wins out there if you're good. So that's all. I just want to make that point real quick. I know we kind of took a quick little wrap up here into another 10 plus minutes of it, but yeah, I can't listen to the narrative of this team's going to be good, but the schedule is going to be harder because this schedule I think is much easier than it was a year ago.
Yeah, definitely agree with you there. All right, Big Blue Nation, that's going to wrap up this episode of the Cats Talk podcast. I will be down in Lexington for Fan Day and Media Day on Saturday, getting you guys some content for the TikTok. I'll send it over to Jacob to put it on X and Instagram and all of that, so make sure to follow us there on Spotify and YouTube as well. Football season, guys, only 29 days away. We're going to start covering this team a little bit more in detail here coming soon next Thursday. Look for a Kentucky preview series. I know, Jacob, you saw the look on his face right there when I said it. I said the preview series. He started wiping the face. He's not thrilled about it, but guess what? We're going to start talking ourselves into it. I'll have Jacob betting on FanDuel here soon, that over. With that being said, guys, thanks for tuning in. Go Big Blue.
Go Big Blue.
Go Big.